The smell of butter and salt filled the cramped concession stand at the Odeon Leicester Square. James, the theater manager, was going through his usual pre-premiere checklist when a peculiar figure appeared at the staff entrance. The man wore thick-rimmed glasses, a baseball cap pulled low over his face, and what appeared to be a second-hand uniform that didn't quite fit right. "I'm here for the job," the stranger said in a gravelly American accent that seemed oddly familiar. "The temporary position?" James furrowed his brow, consulting his clipboard. "There must be some mistake. We're not hiring it." "Check again," the man insisted, sliding a folded note across the counter. Inside was a business card from the studio's executive producer and a handwritten message, "Play along. Trust me on this one." James read the note twice, then looked up at the stranger with wide eyes. The man raised his cap slightly, revealing a knowing smirk and those unmistakable cheekbones. James nearly dropped his clipboard. "Mr. D." "Tonight, I'm just Jack," the actor interrupted softly. "Jack Smith. Recently moved from Kentucky. First day on the job. And I'd really appreciate it if we could keep it that way." James nodded slowly, still processing the surreal situation. Here was Johnny Depp, one of the most recognizable actors in the world, asking to work incognito at his own movie premiere as a popcorn seller. The theater manager had heard stories about Depp's eccentricities, but this was something else entirely. "The premiere starts in 3 hours," James whispered. "Your premiere? The red carpet, the press." "Will all happen exactly as planned," Johnny assured him. "But first, I'd like to do something different. Something real." He gestured to the popcorn machine. "Mind showing me how this works?" For the next hour, James trained his most unusual employee on the art of popcorn selling. Johnny proved to be a quick study, though his first attempt at operating the machine resulted in a minor explosion of kernels that had them both laughing as they cleaned up the mess. "You know," Johnny mused as he swept, "I've played so many characters over the years. Pirates, Mad Hatters, vampires, but sometimes I wonder if I've lost touch with what it means to just be normal. To have a simple interaction that isn't colored by fame or expectations." James watched as Johnny meticulously arranged the candy display, taking the task as seriously as any role he'd ever played. "But why tonight? Why your own premiere?" Johnny's eyes twinkled with mischief. "Because, mate, sometimes the best view of a storm is from right in the middle of it." And trust me, he adjusted his name tag, which read Jack, in slightly crooked letters. "This is going to be one hell of a storm." As the first early arriving guests began trickling into the theater, Johnny took his position behind the counter. His disguise was simple but effective. The glasses, the cap, the slightly hunched posture that made him seem shorter than he was. But it was more than that. He had somehow transformed himself into the kind of person you'd look right past, the kind of worker you'd interact with briefly and forget moments later. The first test came when a couple approached the counter. The woman was wearing a t-shirt with Jack Sparrow's face on it. "What can I get you?" Johnny asked in a perfect Kentucky drawl, nothing like his normal voice or any of his famous character voices. "Large popcorn, please," the man said, not looking up from his phone. "Salt or caramel?" Johnny asked, then added with just the slightest hint of a smile, "Or maybe rum?" The woman laughed, completely missing the inside joke. "Just salt, thanks." As Johnny scooped their popcorn, he could hear the growing excitement outside. The red carpet was being prepared. Photographers were taking their positions. Soon, everyone would be wondering where Johnny Depp was, never suspecting that he was right here, serving popcorn with the dedication of a method actor preparing for the role of a lifetime. But this wasn't preparation for a role. This was something else entirely, a famous man's desperate attempt to feel normal again, if only for a few hours. And as the night was about to prove, sometimes the most extraordinary stories begin with the simplest of disguises and a bucket of popcorn. Little did anyone know that this was just the beginning of an evening that would become Hollywood legend, an evening that would remind everyone that sometimes the greatest performance happens when the cameras aren't rolling at all. The crowd outside the theater was growing exponentially. Through the concession stand's window, Johnny could see the flashing cameras and hear the rising chatter of excitement. His phone buzzed in his pocket for the 20th time, undoubtedly his publicist having a meltdown about his whereabouts. He ignored it, focusing instead on perfectly layering the butter on a customer's popcorn. "You're new here, aren't you?" asked a teenage girl, squinting at him as he handed her a large soda. There was something in her gaze that made his heart skip a beat, that look of almost recognition that he'd learned to identify over decades of fame. "First day," he replied, deliberately fumbling with the change to reinforce his persona as a slightly awkward newcomer. "Still learning the ropes." You remind me of someone, she mused, then shrugged and moved on. James appeared at his side, wiping nervous sweat from his forehead. Your agent just called the theater directly. She's threatening to call the police if we don't reveal your location. Johnny chuckled, though there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. Funny how people panic when you step out of the box they've put you in. He checked his watch. Still got an hour before I'm supposedly due on the red carpet. Plenty of time. The next customer approached, an elderly man who squinted at the menu board. Young man, he called out, what would you recommend for someone who hasn't been to the pictures in 20 years? Something in the man's gentle manner made Johnny pause. Well, sir, he said, letting just a touch of warmth seep into his Kentucky accent, I'd say this calls for something special. He began mixing candies and popcorn in a way he perfected in his trailer during long filming days. A little sweet, a little salt, and just enough butter to make you remember why you fell in love with the movies in the first place. The old man took a bite and his eyes lit up. Now that's something. You should be in the entertainment business, son. Johnny bit back a smile. Just lucky, I guess. As the evening progressed, Johnny found himself experiencing something he hadn't felt in years, the simple joy of anonymous human connection. Each interaction, though brief, felt real in a way that red carpet conversations never did. He made a young child laugh by pretending the popcorn machine was a spaceship. He offered genuine movie recommendations to uncertain customers. He listened to a woman's story about her first date in this very theater 40 years ago. But the bubble of normalcy couldn't last forever. The first serious crack appeared when a group of drama students entered, discussing his filmography in detailed, academic terms. Depp's early work with Burton clearly shows a pattern of, one of them was saying as they approached the counter. Welcome to Odeon, Johnny interrupted, perhaps a bit too quickly. What can I get you? The students placed their order, but one of them, a sharp-eyed young woman with purple hair, kept staring at him throughout the transaction. As they walked away, he could hear her whispered conversation. I swear to God, there's something about that guy. James appeared again, looking even more frazzled. The red carpet is starting. The press is asking questions. Twitter is exploding with theories about your absence. Time for one more customer, Johnny said, as a hairy-looking woman approached with 2 young children. 3 popcorns, please, she said, digging through her purse. As Johnny prepared the order, one of her children dropped their toy. When he bent down to retrieve it, his cap shifted slightly. The woman froze, her eyes widening in shock. For a moment, they stared at each other in silence. Then, remarkably, she gave him a small, understanding smile and pressed a finger to her lips. Thank you for the popcorn, she said meaningfully, then ushered her children away, never revealing his secret. Johnny straightened up, touched by the unexpected moment of complicity. But as he did, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. Through the window, he could see a familiar face in the crowd, his co-star from the film, looking confused and concerned as she scanned the theater entrance. She was walking straight toward the concession stand. James grabbed his arm. Back exits through the supply room. But Mr. Depp, Johnny, are you sure you want to end it like this? Johnny looked at the popcorn machine, then at the growing line of customers, then at his approaching co-star. In that moment, he had to make a decision that would either preserve the magic of the evening or shatter it completely. And in true Johnny Depp fashion, he chose to do something that nobody, not even he, expected.
Tell us in the comments what part of this story impressed you the most. If you liked it, please like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next videos. See you in the world of incredible events.
Johnny watched his co-star, Emma Reynolds, approaching the concession stand. Her designer gown sparkled under the theater lights, a stark contrast to his rumpled uniform. In that moment, he made his decision. Instead of running, he turned up the popcorn machine and started humming an old sea shanty. Emma reached the counter, her expression shifting from confusion to disbelief as she recognized him despite the disguise. Before she could speak, he raised a finger to his lips and gestured for her to come around to his side of the counter. What are you doing? She whispered, ducking under the counter flap. Everyone's looking for you. The director's about to have a heart attack. Emma, he said, still maintaining his Kentucky accent for the benefit of nearby customers. How would you like to learn the noble art of popcorn making? She stared at him as if he'd lost his mind. Maybe he had. But there was something in his eyes, a spark of genuine joy she hadn't seen in years of working with him, that made her pause. You're serious? As a cardiac arrest, he replied, handing her an apron. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced to the growing line of customers, please welcome our newest trainee. The absurdity of the situation, An A-list actress in a couture gown donning a popcorn vendor's apron wasn't lost on anyone. But something magical happened. The customers, whether they recognized her or not, simply went along with it. First rule of Popcorn Club, Johnny instructed, loud enough for everyone to hear, is we don't talk about Popcorn Club. Emma couldn't help but laugh as she learned to operate the machine, with Johnny guiding her hands through the motions. Her presence changed the dynamic. Now they were co-conspirators in this strange theatrical performance, turning the mundane act of selling concessions into something extraordinary. Word began to spread through the theater. Whispers turned to murmurs, murmurs to excited chatter. People who had been waiting outside on the red carpet began filtering in, drawn by the bizarre rumors circulating on social media. Johnny Depp and Emma Reynolds are serving popcorn. The theater manager, James, watched in amazement as the crowd inside grew, yet remained surprisingly orderly. Everyone seemed to understand they were part of something unique, something that wouldn't happen again. Regular or caramel? Emma asked a young woman who was filming the interaction on her phone. Both, the customer replied, and could you add some of that? What did he call it? That special pirate mix? Johnny grinned beneath his cap. He'd been experimenting all evening, creating specialty combinations. The pirate's booty was his favorite, a sweet and salty mixture with a hint of coconut that he'd improvised from the available ingredients. The director of the film finally pushed his way through to the counter, his face a fascinating mixture of emotions. Johnny, what in God's name? Would you like some popcorn, sir? Johnny asked innocently, still in character. We're having a special premiere promotion tonight. The director opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again as he took in the scene, the line of delighted customers, Emma cheerfully working the machine in her $1,000 gown, the palpable buzz of excitement in the air. This wasn't the premiere anyone had planned, but it was turning into something better, something real. Make it a large, the director sighed, then added with a slight smile, and whatever that pirate mix is everyone's talking about. As Johnny prepared the order, he could see his publicist through the window, phone in hand, already spinning this unexpected situation into marketing gold. Sometimes chaos created the best opportunities. But the evening wasn't over yet. Through the growing crowd, a familiar figure appeared, someone Johnny hadn't seen in years, someone who knew him better than almost anyone else in Hollywood. Their eyes met across the counter, and Johnny realized that his little experiment in normalcy was about to take yet another unexpected turn. The question was, would this surprise guest play along with his improvised performance, or bring the whole charade crashing down around his ears? Either way, as Johnny had learned throughout his career, the show must go on. He adjusted his cap, shared a knowing look with Emma, and prepared to face whatever came next, one bucket of popcorn at a time. Tim Burton stood at the counter, his wild hair and distinctive glasses unmistakable even in the theater's dim lighting. His expression was unreadable as he studied Johnny behind his makeshift disguise. The entire concession area seemed to hold its breath. Well, Tim finally said, his voice carrying that familiar mix of bemusement and inspiration, I always said you were method, Johnny. But this. He gestured at the scene before him, Emma in her designer gown dusting caramel off her hands, the growing crowd of onlookers, the perfectly arranged rows of candy and popcorn. This might be your best performance yet. Johnny's shoulders relaxed slightly. If anyone would understand this moment of carefully orchestrated chaos, it would be Tim. Their decades of collaboration had been built on exactly this kind of beautiful strangeness. Care to join the cast? Johnny asked, holding out a spare apron. Tim's eyes sparkled with that same manic creativity that had birthed Edward Scissorhands and so many other beloved characters. I think this might be your show, old friend. But he leaned in conspiratorially. I might have an idea to make it even better. While Tim huddled with Johnny and Emma, James the theater manager noticed something extraordinary happening throughout the building. The normal premiere barriers, the invisible walls between celebrities and fans, between performers and audience, were dissolving. People who had paid hundreds for their tickets were chatting easily with others who had won their seats in radio contests. Everyone was united in their delight at being part of this unexpected story. Ladies and gentlemen, Tim announced suddenly, his distinctive voice carrying through the lobby. In honor of tonight's unique premiere, we're going to do things a little differently. Everyone who purchases popcorn in the next 30 minutes will have their snacks personally delivered to their seats by our unusual concession staff. The crowd erupted in excitement. Emma shot Tim a look that was half amusement, half panic. Johnny just grinned and started scooping popcorn faster. You realize this means walking into a fully lit theater, Emma whispered. Everyone will recognize us. That's the point, Tim replied. Sometimes the best way to hide is to be exactly where everyone expects you not to be. And so began the most surreal 30 minutes in the theater's history. Johnny, still in his vendor's uniform but now moving with a hint of Jack Sparrow's swagger, weaved through the aisles delivering popcorn. Emma followed, her gown catching the light as she handed out sodas and candy. They were joined by other cast members who had caught wind of the situation and decided to embrace the madness. The premiere's photographer, initially frustrated by Johnny's absence from the red carpet, now couldn't stop taking pictures of this impromptu performance. Social media was exploding with clips and photos, but surprisingly, most people in the theater were too caught up in the moment to bother with their phones. As Johnny reached the back row with his last delivery of the night, he found himself face to face with an elderly usher who had worked at the theater for over 50 years. "You know," the usher said quietly, "back in the golden age of cinema, this was how it was. Stars and audiences sharing the same air, the same experiences. Before everything got so." He waved his hand, searching for the word. "Manufactured?" Johnny suggested. "Precisely." The usher smiled. "You've given these people something better than a glimpse of a star tonight. You've given them a story they'll tell for years." As Johnny made his way back to the concession stand, he could feel the energy in the building shifting. The official premiere start time was approaching, and soon he would have to make a decision about how to transition from popcorn seller back to movie star. But first, there was one last surprise, one that not even Tim Burton could have orchestrated. Through the theater's front doors walked someone who had inspired Johnny's entire career, someone whose presence would turn this already extraordinary evening into something truly legendary. The question was, would this final twist provide the perfect ending to his experiment in authenticity, or would it remind him exactly why stars usually stuck to the red carpet in the first place? Marlon Brando had once said that acting was the expression of a neurotic impulse, a desire to play different roles to escape oneself. These words echoed in Johnny's mind as he watched his childhood hero, Al Pacino, walk through the theater doors. The legendary actor paused, taking in the scene before him with those famously intense eyes. Johnny felt rooted to the spot behind the concession counter. Pacino had been his inspiration since he was a teenager watching The Godfather in a small Kentucky theater, dreaming of becoming an actor. Now here they were, decades later, in a situation that no scriptwriter would have dared to invent. Pacino approached the counter slowly, the crowd parting before him like a scene from one of his movies. He stopped directly in front of Johnny, studied him for a long moment, then broke into his characteristic wide smile. "You know," Pacino said, his voice carrying that familiar gravelly warmth, "I started out selling popcorn in the Bronx. Minimum wage, double shifts, dreaming of being on the other side of the counter." He leaned in closer. "But sometimes, kid, I miss those days. They were real in a way that Hollywood never is." Emma, still in her popcorn-dusted gown, watched the interaction with wonder. Tim Burton had stopped his nervous pacing. The entire theater seemed to hold its breath. "Would you like some popcorn, sir?" Johnny asked, still maintaining his Kentucky accent, though his eyes betrayed his emotion. "Only if you'll share it with me," Pacino replied. "But first." He turned to address the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, you're here tonight expecting to see a movie. But what you've actually witnessed is something far rarer, a moment of pure theater, where the line between performance and reality disappears." He gestured toward Johnny. This man could have walked the red carpet. He could have done the interviews, posed for the photos, played the game we all know so well. Instead, he chose to remind us of something important, that every role, whether it's a pirate captain or a popcorn vendor, has dignity. That every interaction, no matter how small, has meaning. Johnny finally removed his cap and glasses, letting go of his disguise. The transformation was subtle but profound, not from popcorn seller to movie star, but from one authentic version of himself to another. The movie we're about to watch, Johnny addressed the crowd, his natural voice returning, is about a man who learns to see the world through different eyes. I needed to do the same. Tonight, you didn't just give me your business, you gave me something far more valuable. You gave me your genuine reactions, your real smiles, your true selves. James, the theater manager, stepped forward with a tray holding 3 special servings of the Pirate's Booty popcorn mix. Johnny, Pacino, and Tim Burton each took one, creating an unlikely but perfect tableau. To the magic of movies, Pacino proposed. And to the people who make them possible, Johnny added, gesturing to the entire theater, the ushers, the staff, the audience, everyone who had become part of this unexpected story. As they made their way to their seats for the premiere, Johnny noticed the elderly usher from earlier giving him a knowing wink. The woman who had kept his secret was sharing the story with her delighted children. The drama students were furiously taking notes, probably already planning their thesis on meta-performance in modern cinema. Emma caught up with him just before they entered the screening room. "You know this is going to be everywhere tomorrow, right? Social media, entertainment news, probably some think pieces about the state of modern celebrity." Johnny smiled. "Let them talk. Sometimes the best stories are the ones you can't quite explain." The lights dimmed, and as the opening credits began to roll, Johnny found himself sitting between Al Pacino and Tim Burton, still in his popcorn vendor's uniform, a bag of his own special mix in his lap. He could feel the warmth of the audience behind him, not as fans or admirers, but as fellow travelers who had shared in something genuine. In the darkness of the theater, just before his face appeared on the massive screen, Johnny Depp smiled to himself. He had come here tonight to escape the spotlight, only to find something he didn't know he was looking for. A reminder that the best roles aren't the ones you play, they're the ones that play you. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he could already hear the familiar voice of Captain Jack Sparrow. "A touch of destiny, mate. A touch of destiny."
Tell us in the comments what part of this story impressed you the most. If you liked it, please like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss the next videos. See you in the world of incredible events.